Over time, the sounds inside the clay house began to change. The house was no longer still. Every night, the shadows moved more freely, almost breathing outside the walls. Villagers who tried to approach heard footsteps behind them and whispers calling their names. Fear clung to the air like mist, thickening with every heartbeat. One night, a curious boy from the village ignored the elders' warnings. He had always been brave, or perhaps foolish, and approached the house quietly, listening to the whispers that seemed to seep from the cracks in the clay walls. The closer he got, the colder the air became, and the more the ground seemed to shift beneath his feet, almost pulling him forward. Inside, the mirror moved on its own. A girl's shadow stood behind the glass, smiling coldly. Her eyes were empty voids, yet they seemed to pierce straight through him. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. He tried to run, but every path led him back to the same door. The house refused to let him leave, as if it had grown arms of clay that stretched into the village itself. Meanwhile, the villagers began noticing strange signs around the clay house. Small footprints appeared and disappeared into the clay. The baskets left near the house were overturned, their contents soaked in a mysterious liquid that no one could identify. And always, at night, the windows would show shadows, faint at first, then clearer, small, thin silhouettes with black eyes, smiling as they watched anyone who dared approach. The house had become alive. Its walls breathed, its clay shifted, and it moved subtly, as though it could reach into the world outside. The shadows no longer belonged strictly inside, they roamed freely around the village, whispering names, laughing softly in the wind, always testing the limits of fear. The mirror inside had transformed into a gateway, showing the faces of villagers who had vanished years ago. They stared out from the glass, eyes dark and mouths moving silently, as if begging for company. The boundary between the living and the shadow world became thinner with each passing night. Sumaya, now part of the shadows, began appearing at the window. Her eyes completely black, her smile chilling, she whispered through the glass to those who came too close, "Now we have a new house, and no one leaves except through the shadow." Anyone venturing near the desert after that could hear whispers, eerie laughter, and sometimes the sound of small footsteps circling them. The clay moved independently, shifting and twisting, as though it could sense the living and slowly draw them closer. The house lived, waited, and fed, ready for its next visitor. The night was pitch black, and the wind howled like wild beasts prowling between the bare trees. The dirt road leading to the forgotten village was eerily silent, as if the silence itself were watching every step. In this village, which had vanished from maps decades ago, the elders always warned, every house here has a shadow that does not follow the sun, does not move with light, a shadow that watches, waits, and feeds on fear. That night, Sumaya, a 17-year-old girl, slender, with eyes as wide as deep wells, walked alone along the road, returning from her grandmother's house. She carried a basket of bread and dates, her mind still on what the old woman had told her before leaving, "Never pass by the clay house after midnight, my girl, for what lives inside does not like eyes that watch it." Sumaya laughed softly to herself, thinking it was just a story. Little did she know, the shadow had been waiting for her for years. As she neared the clay house, the air grew heavier, as though the silence itself were scrutinizing her. The house was small, its walls tilted, the wooden door half open, and a faint smell of damp earth wafted out despite the dry night. In a single window, a woman's silhouette stood motionless, her eyes glowing red. Sumaya froze, her heart pounding, sweat dripping from her cold forehead. She craned her neck in terror, and in the blink of an eye, the shadow vanished. Something fell inside the house, followed by slow, dragging footsteps. She tried to step back, but her foot sank into the clay as if the earth itself had grabbed her. Suddenly, the door creaked open with a shrill groan of old wood, releasing a foul, metallic stench. "Sumaya," a voice whispered. It was neither male nor female, but something in between, as if it came from the very walls themselves. Before she could react, she found herself sitting on the house floor. The interior was far larger than it appeared from the outside, the walls breathing, each inhale lifted the clay slightly, each exhale pushed it back. She heard footsteps behind her but saw no one. In a corner, a rusty mirror leaned against the wall. When she looked into it, she saw herself, but her face was completely black, her eyes voids, and her mouth moved silently, forming words she could not hear. Finally, "You're back, Sumaya." She screamed and stumbled into a wall that suddenly became soft, like living flesh. The clay twisted around her, pulling her in gradually until only her trembling hand was visible before it vanished completely. Even the road leading to the house became haunted. Travelers reported sudden chills, fleeting shadows darting in the corner of their eyes, and the feeling of being watched. Some claimed to have glimpsed the shadows of the children who had vanished long ago, following them silently until they reached the village edge, only to vanish at dawn. Through it all, the shadows multiplied, growing bolder, moving faster, creeping along walls, following travelers into the night. The mirror reflected not just the present, but the missing, the lost, the doomed, showing their black-eyed faces to anyone brave, or foolish, enough to stare. Weeks later, the desert seemed alive with whispers and soft, sinister laughter. Travelers passing by reported seeing a small girl's shadow watching them from afar, her black eyes unblinking, her smile eerily calm. The clay shifted on its own, almost breathing, and the house remained, patient and hungry, waiting for the next visitor brave, or foolish, enough to approach. Every house has a shadow, but not every shadow has a house. Drop of Blood, the end.